Welcome to the panel portion of our day. Give me this is I like it, this is I don't like it, this is I don't really care. How do you feel about the temperature in this room? Okay, as long as we don't have any thumbs down. Good then. All right, you're welcome, live stream. I know you wanted to know that. So we're entering the panel portion of our day. It's a little stranger than we had anticipated when we planned it. Our original schedule for the conference was to spend a day talking about economic justice issues and the intersections for LGBTQ folk, and to spend a day talking about how culture and class can affect the intersections of justice issues. And with the huge mind-numbing storm that blew through our area, we've kind of put some things together. One thing that is true about intersecting points of justice is that means that some of those issues connect together. So I just say all of that to begin with my apologies that each of these conversations deserved an entire day of talking about them, right? And as often happens, we mush them all together because we don't have enough time to talk about them. And so blame me if you want to be mad about it, or blame God for the storm. But this is where we are, and this is the time that we have and the conversation that we have. And I'm very excited about our panelists. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself with like your name or whatever title you want to affix yourself to, preferred gender pronouns, and then a brief description of the work that you do in the world. Sound good? Okay, Emily, you have to go first because you seem like you don't want to.
Okay, great. My name is Emily Cohen. My preferred gender pronoun is she. I work in homeless services. I have done so for about the past 10 years. I currently work at Project Homeless Connect. I've done both direct social service, political advocacy, and sort of research evaluation type work within homelessness, economic justice, housing, that sort of sphere. Just since we're live streaming, I should say anything I say today is my opinion and not that of my agency.
Okay. Hello everyone, mabuhay. My name is Johanna de la Cruz, but you can call me Chikay. I'm from the Philippines. I just arrived here last August. And my work in the Philippines is I am a youth desk coordinator with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. So I work with different youth organizations from different churches. And I also work with the Student Christian Movement in the Philippines. So, yeah. Sorry.
I'm Janelle. I'm a pastor at Pine United Methodist Church in San Francisco. It's the first API, Asian Pacific Islander Reconciling Congregation in the UMC. I also do a lot of my work in the world through the California, Nevada, Philippine Solidarity Task Force of the United Methodist Church. That works very closely with NCCP, which is where Chikai was working at before. Oh, my PGP. She, her, I respond to bro, dude, and guys in the collective.
Okay. My name is Israel Alberon. Friends call me Izzy. I am a United Methodist minister, originally from the Philippines, but now I'm based in the Bay Area. I am also an organizer with Reconciling Ministries Network, which is the LGBTQIA advocacy group within the United Methodist Church, which is still probably among the mainline Protestant denominations, pretty much homophobic and oppressive to queer people. And I also do organizing work with until the end of the month with Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, which is a faith-rooted organizing group that works around economic justice issues, housing, poverty. We do trainings as well. So that just shows you my two passions is economic justice and organizing with the queer community. I am, our church says that if you're self-avowed practicing homosexual, you could be defrocked. And even if we're live streamed, if my bishop is listening to what I'm saying, I want him to know that I am a self-avowed practicing homosexual.
Woohoo!
And I could be defrocked. The church can do that. Then, then if they do that, they're just admitting that I'm probably wearing a frock. So stop making us use frocks if you want us to be defrocked. I'm also active with Jobs for Justice and with the Network on Religion and Justice for API LGBTQ people, which I'm on the board as well. There you go.
Yay, panel!
Yay.
Part of the thing that we're trying to think about in this conference is what are the issues that are rising to the cream. Is that a South Dakota thing, where the cream rises to the top of the milk? Or what are the issues that rise to your consciousness right now, whether it's because of political reasons or a passion call? But if we could go through the panel, what I'm curious about is, are there aspects or are there particular issues that you think we should be paying attention to that we might not know about, or that we do know a lot about, but we still need to pay attention to it? So what issues that are at the intersection of LGBTQ issues do you think that we should be paying attention to right now? Let's go the other way around.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Emily.
So I work with, I mentioned earlier, I work with Reconciling Ministries Network, and we're in existence for 30 years. This is our 30th year, and I just started working last year. And we've been struggling over the summer while we were in transition about issues of race. That's one thing. Of how we actually practice our being reconciling on the LGBTQ side, and how do we actually see that intersected with the fact that you have people who are organizers, and that there are LGBTQ people who are people of color, and that we want to minister to them. So I think matters of race is very important, and in the organization I work with, I'm really pushing for accountability around intersectionality.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we can just say, we pay lip service to, we were open, we're reconciling, we're loving people, we're welcoming, but it's not shown in other parts of people's lives. Like, thank you for fighting for gay marriage. I can get married if I wanted to get married. What if I'm polyamorous? But that's another subject altogether. I just don't want to come out polyamorous. I'm bringing my phone number. But if you want to have a fabulous gay wedding and you don't have a job because you were fired from your work for being queer, you got to do something about that, right? And so economic justice is also something that I think about a lot.
Mm.
And I could talk more later. I just want to give other people a chance to speak.
Okay. So for myself, the intersections that we've been struggling with, well, I just want to say that I identify as Filipino American, second generation. So I was born and raised here, meaning that this idea of solidarity, when I do solidarity work with the Philippines, is a little bit complex because I am Filipino, but I'm not Filipino from the Philippines, right? So that in itself is already an intersection at some degree. One of the cases that our task force is looking at, and the partners that we're working with are looking at, is the case of Jennifer Laude. I don't know if y'all have heard of Jennifer Laude. On October 11th of this year, Jennifer Laude, a 26-year-old Filipino transgender woman, was found dead in Olongapo in a hotel bathroom, strangled to death with her head in the toilet bowl. And the autopsy showed that she died of asphyxiation by drowning. And she was last seen alive checking into a hotel with Private First Class Joseph Scott Pemberton, U.S. Marine. Some reports say that prior to the murder, Jennifer had expressed to a friend her concern of Pemberton finding out about her transgender identity. And so the intersection there is U.S. militarization and U.S. imperialism. LGBTQ lives are not safe in a place where U.S. imperialism exists. Especially when it comes to the bodies of women, the transgender women, those whose lives are not, who don't fit into the patriarchal framework. Those lives are mostly the ones that are vulnerable and in danger of bearing the brunt of violence because of U.S. militarization in the Philippines. So I'm gonna pass it on to you. She can probably elaborate more in terms of the relationship between the Philippines and the U.S.
Yeah, so I guess for me, one of the things that I will be sharing is about the context of the Philippines. And like as what Reverend Janelle told us, is like there is like an equal relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines now in terms of their military might. So like the Philippines is a third world country, and historically it was under Spain for 350 years, and then it was under the U.S. For like so many years, and then up until now, the U.S. empire is still in the in our country. So one of the things that are happening is like the injustices, like the killing of and the rape of Nicole. Nicole is one of the women in Olongapo City, where the U.S. base was before, and now the killing of Jennifer Laude. So the intersection of U.S. imperialism in our country is a very grave and very it's one of the biggest issues in our that the Filipino people are facing in terms of our sovereignty. So there are a lot of injustice that are happening. I was just reminded of our Bible study. So when we call about justice, we should know the different injustices that are happening, and it's not only in and around here, the U.S., but it's also happening around the world. So I think it is very important to like raise issues and concerns and to address that collectively as youth and students. And of course, so those are some of the things that I'm reflecting on, and I think this body, as young people, we have the power to transform the world together and push for more solidarity and to witness the different relationships of economic and even political injustices that are very systemic and are happening around us.
In my work with people who are homeless here in San Francisco, I see a lot of this intersection around access to economic opportunity, access to housing, access to medical treatment, access to hormones, poverty and the LGBT community. I think there's such stereotypes, right, of fabulous gay men who live in the Castro and are looking great and everything's fabulous, and it's all a total stereotype. In fact, folks living in the Castro are being evicted at very high rates right now, and because their affordable housing has been sold to speculators and wealthy tech folks, and they're being put out. In San Francisco, 30% of the homeless population, both youth and older adults, which I think is an important distinction, identify as LGBT. There's a lot of stuff in the media and popular discussion, I think, about youth LGBT homelessness, but not as much as discussed about seniors, and that's something that we're definitely seeing with the eviction crisis in San Francisco. So that's definitely an area that I'm really attuned to right now, is looking at housing and looking at economic opportunity and how that intersects with our community. Especially for folks who are transgender, I think being able to access hormones, if that's something that you want to be doing, is an economic privilege. It's not something that is necessarily readily available and creates a huge internal and external issue for people. I have one particular client that I'm thinking of, and she's unable to access hormones for a number of different reasons. And when she's offered hormones, she presents in a much more male way than she feels. And then the world perceives her in that way as well, and she gets treated in really horrible ways. I think because she's unable to project who she perceives herself to be, or who she is. And it's all related to economics. It's related to the fact that she can't get the mental health treatment she needs in order to stop getting kicked out of other clinics. It's related to the fact that she can't pay for things, that she's unable to consistently stay housed. And that intersection to me is where I'm spending a lot of my time.
I mean, I'd also like to add, since I totally forgot, I'm an immigrant.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant. Janelle mentioned it, that she was born here. I was born in Manila, and just moved here for grad school in 2003. So I'm pretty much fresh off the boat, even if I've been here for 12, 13 years. But immigration is a concern, not just for LGBTQIA folks who are moving over as immigrants, whether they're undocumented or not, or whether they're fleeing from their home country for being queer and being persecuted, so they have to come as either a refugee or as a political asylee. I applied for political asylum, but not because I'm queer, but because of my political views, which might harm me, being an activist in the Philippines. But I think this message of being accepting and welcoming should not just be for queer people who are immigrants, but for immigrants in general. And this should be true for congregations who are reconciling congregations, or open, welcoming, affirming, whatever we want to call ourselves. And I see that this church is one as well. That if we're welcoming of queer people, of gay people, there's no reason why we can't be welcoming and provide sanctuary to immigrants. Because if we love queer people, queer people are very fluid, and we just flow here and there. Our identities are very fluid, and that's why I guess the theme is such. But immigrants also cross borders. It's just that our borders are our bodies, or our, how we perceive ourselves, or how we perceive our community. We cross borders the same way that they do. We risk our lives the same way that they do. They might be crossing the Rio Grande or the Pacific, or just in a truck being brought over, the same way that queer people have to cross borders in the closet, whether it be a glass closet or actually an iron closet. So if we're really welcoming, then we need to start thinking about how can we welcome the stranger the same way that we're open to queer people. We should be open to other people who want to come and be part of our community. So that's an intersection that sometimes is rarely seen, even by gay people, by queer people. And if our notion of San Francisco, when you go to the Castro, you see the Castro twins, the twins and all that, they're all dolled up and pretty. But a lot of my community, I think, don't really know what's happening to other people who have the same kind of experience. It's just different. How can you not? I have a friend who's gay, and we have a mutual friend who's queer as well. And I didn't know, he didn't know that he was undocumented and actually was a dreamer and got benefits from the Deferred Action for Dreamers, DACA. And when when my friend talked about documented immigration, he was undocumented immigrants, the other queer person said, well, they should just stand at the back of the line. And we were, they were both from Cal, and I thought they were like a little bit progressive, but he just didn't get it. I told him, like, dude, they don't have a line to actually stand in. So don't tell them you immigrated here because you were petitioned and you got through that. But don't you think as a queer person, your own struggle of having to come out to your Asian family is the same way that this person has to cross the border and hide, the same way that you would hide in the closet for a long time? So this intersection is very key at this point. I think it has a lot of political ramifications in our community.
My last question before we open up to the group is, what are the things that you have seen that you think are best practices that if they were replicated in other places would be great? Emily.
Best practices for
any of these issues that we're talking about. Just talk about LGBTQ Connect a second.
Okay.
Okay.
So
everyone else will answer the question. You just do that.
Great. I'll just plug my program. One of the innovative things that Project Homeless Connect has done over the last couple of years to be more inclusive of the LGBT community in our direct service work is we're actually hearing from some of our program participants that they would come to our office and get services from me and my team, but they didn't want to come to our big service events because they didn't feel welcome. They didn't feel safe, both with service providers and necessarily with other homeless folks. And so one of the things we did was hosting a LGBTQ focused event where we held it at the LGBT Center, which has not always been the most poor friendly place to be. And it was really amazing because I actually think that was more a perception than reality. They really opened their arms and said, yes, we want you to be here, but they had a reputation, right? And we had a reputation of not being queer friendly, which was ironic because so many of our staff are queer, and we all thought we were so queer friendly, but we were hearing that our services weren't accessible. So by hosting this event that was very intentionally queer friendly, very intentionally inclusive, we invited what we thought were the right service providers, queer focused service providers, as well as homeless focused service providers into the event. We did a lot of targeted outreach, and we've done it twice now, and the event's been really successful. We've really been able to help bring folks into a system that they've been really resistant to be involved with, all, for the most part, based on perceptions of prejudice or discrimination or inability to access services. And I think that has not only changed this one particular event that is now very popular and folks can get a variety of social, health, medical services that day, but has also made the rest of our programming more inclusive, and I think has also brought people to us to say, oh, I didn't know I could come here. We wanted to be like, yes, of course you can come here. And but it made us really aware of how we were being perceived in the community, and what sort of steps we needed to be really proactive about being inclusive rather than just, the default. Like, of course we're inclusive.
I guess for us in the Philippines, with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, we do open up forums or discussions about human sexuality so that everybody will be included. And we also have that intersection with how the church people could, the different member organizations and member churches of the NCCP would open up to this kind of discussion. Philippines is a patriarchal society, so it is difficult for us culturally to talk about the LGBT issues, but I know a lot of our young people and even some of our pastors are open to it, but our culture is quite, it's not that, I don't think it's not ready, but I think it's just trying to be more conservative, but as young people and revolutionaries, one way to transform the world is to really break that glass or the divides, or the wall that divides us all. So one way to challenge the church is to open up discussions. And in terms of peace and justice work, a lot of our young people from the churches are challenged to go to different communities and immerse there and see and hear and feel and experience the different variations or different areas of injustices, economic injustices that are happening, the militarization in the countryside. So witnessing is a very, very important aspect of the work that we do. I know Johanna has been to the Philippines many times over, and the stories of our people is really something that I bring everywhere, and because it transformed me as a person. And I'm also trying to just just let those stories transform me so that I can also share, and all of us will be part of this justice group and justice making society. So thank you.
I lost track of what the question was.
If you know
Best
of
practice.
things that work,
Okay.
things that work.
All right,
Make us-
so for the task force, Philippine Solidarity Task Force, I guess some of the things that have worked is, well, for one, a lot of our leadership identifies as LGBTQ. Okay, no, not T
Yeah.
yet.
That you
But
know of.
That we,
That we know.
yeah.
Exactly.
So so the leadership, although we work on solidarity with the Philippines, and why I felt like it was important for me to name that I'm second generation, that I was born and raised here, is because the people who join our ministry are allies and are also people who may be third generation Filipino American, mixed race, and also identifying as queer. There are so many intersections just in our very beings, and some of this work that's focused on undoing U.S. imperialism is also an act of healing the colonial history of the Philippines, the colonial history, the colonial impact that it still has on us, even if we're not in the Philippines. Here, being in the U.S., we have no idea of our histories. We don't really have stories that are told from our perspectives. I don't know how many of you all know that right now there's currently more military in Mindanao in the southern Philippines than there is in Iraq.
Wow.
I don't know how many of you knew that that the Philippines was the most dangerous place for journalists for a while, only second to Iraq. Like, how many people really know that? And yet, there's something about the U.S. colonial relationship that causes that makes what's going on in the Philippines, it silences, basically. There's silence as far as what is going on in the Philippines. And that silence is also embodied by many Filipino Americans who don't know that these things are happening and who don't know that these things are still impacting them as just people. So for us doing this work, this anti-militarization work, this work for human rights, is a way for us to really affirm who we are, really affirm our whole bodies, because we cannot just be Filipino or just be LGBT or just be women or whatever gender we identify as. How I am Filipino impacts how I am LGBT, impacts how I am a woman, or, they all inform each other, and there's no way you can really section them off or categorize them. So for some of the folks who are doing this solidarity work, one of the great things for us has been to immerse in the Philippines. That has worked in opening our eyes so that we can see the connectedness of our struggles. We can see how this culture of impunity in the Philippines, where people can get away with stuff, is connected with the police state here, where people can get away with stuff. People can get away with hurting people that don't fit a certain framework, right? And that's something that does happen all the time in the Philippines, and we're seeing it. It's becoming more visible here and now, especially with what has happened in Ferguson and with Eric Gardner. So just this fluidity of borders, a fluidity of identity, of what it means to be Filipino, and all the other identities that come with it. There's, I think in doing solidarity work, we're able to really push the edge of what that means. What does it look like to be this or that? What does it feel like to be this or that? Yeah.
Well, part of my work as an organizer for Reconciling Ministry is to work with churches that are either in the process of becoming a reconciling church or community, or they already voted and has been reconciling for years, and now they keep asking you, what's next? What do we do next? And for both of them, I always say, first I want to thank you because you love my people. You love queer people. And you embrace us like, for me, you're like my family. And I always say that as a pastor, when I go to a church, and I've been going to church since I was young, right? But when I was conscious about the fact that the church is not open to me as a gay man, every time I go to church, I leave half of myself, check my gayness at the door, at coat check, and I'm not open. But whenever I'm at a reconciling or open affirming church, I feel like I'm worshiping whole. I always tear up whenever I take communion because I know I can take communion as myself without having to hide from people around me, even if I know God knows, right? And I always ask people who are in the process of becoming reconciling, so active to support the queer community, I said, ask yourselves, who are the strangers in your community? That's always how I started. Who is the alien in your immediate community in this church? And of course you want to say those who are outcasts, LGBTQ people are part of that. Who else are there? Other people. Because once they are aware that I'm not asking for your pity, but then I just want you to see that if you so love me for my situation right now, and yet I have so much privilege, think about other people who are still trying to look for last night's dinner, who didn't have a place to stay last night when there was a storm. You know, maybe there are queer people there, maybe there are not. But then your being an open and reconciling church is tested by not picking and choosing special groups, because I share the same situation with those people, you know. And so I challenge especially churches, reconciling churches, United Methodist churches that are by the border. You should be sanctuary churches. You know, the same way back in the 80s where people hid, you know, immigrants as a form of subversion and saying, no, these are God's people and they are welcome in God's house. If it's true if you said that you're willing to marry same-sex couples in your church and that your pastor said he's willing or she's willing to be defrauded, then you should also be willing to like sacrifice and open your sanctuaries for immigrants. And in matters of grace, and I also say that, I'm very glad when, you know, Ferguson hit, you know, a lot of our board members and some of our staff went there and wanted to be there in person and stand as allies, as queer allies. I say this to a lot of our churches that are predominantly white, that who is missing in this fellowship? I'm not saying you are not complete, but is there somebody that needs to be invited to this banquet that's still out there? Do we need to add more color? I mean, we love the rainbow, but it seems that we need more color in this place. So you just have to challenge people, right? You just have to be honest and say it. And I think that's the best practice when you tell people how it is and offer opportunities for them to be of service. I tell people, you know what? You have a food pantry, you have a homeless program. Maybe 1 week in a month you can look for a homeless shelter that specifically works with LGBTQ youth or homeless LGBTQIA folks. Because you already have it. If they have that program already going, you kind of like ask for one Sunday in a month. So that especially if they're not yet welcoming and reconciling, you know, the old church ladies that sometimes handle these programs, then they'll have a chance to see face-to-face queer youth. Because some of them say, I don't know a gay person. Well, if you're there serving food and that's your passion, that's where God will speak to you, and that queer person comes up to you and says, thank you for being here, providing for our food, and by the way, I'm a gay young person. Then that person has never seen someone, and yet they met at the point where she was willing to be gracious by offering food. So small things matter.
What other questions do we have?
I guess I have one related to what you were saying.
Sure.
My question is, because I attend a undergrad school, a small private liberal arts college in Birmingham, Alabama. Yes, and so I am a part of an LGBTQ organization, but then also a religious life on our campus, and we're a Methodist college. And
It's a United Methodist school.
yes, and so we have a lot of affirming support with the school and with our campus, but we don't have a lot of diversity, and there are students who are there, and so my question ultimately is, what do you
tokenism is such a, it's easy to fall into that. And so I mean, if it's a predominantly white congregation, I would rather say, like, you know what, you need to be out in their space first and build those relationships first. Because yes, we need to intentionally invite everybody to our space, but then sometimes that's kind of tricky. I'm not saying that it's bad to be in Birmingham, Alabama, but you're actually in a great space to be a witness. And for that, I should actually be envious instead of me being in the bubble city of San Francisco. And well, we have a retired African American bishop that just did a same-sex wedding in Birmingham last year. That was big. And I would suggest that, you know, if you have that community that you work with in your campus that's Methodist run, if you're a predominantly white church, I think we need to look for spaces where people of color are and start dialogue and conversation. And then that's how we apply being an ally. And I like it when it was said earlier, if you're an ally and you're coming to a space where you're an ally and you're not the actual person affected, you're supporting, it's not just you shut up, but I think an ally also provides means and doors, like what you said, you open the door, stay there, hold it as much as you can, and let those people go in and speak. And that's your role. And if that could be something that you could do, is that bring people to first see and experience what is it like and talk to people. Because some people are so excited to bring people to their space, and sometimes we just, you know, shower them with so much love and not really being mindful that we might be being paternalistic or we're overbearing. But then for us to first listen and see and feel what it's like, how are those people actually witnessing for themselves.
Can I say something too? Or add on to that? Because we are a group that does solidarity work, we're from the U.S., right? We have U.S. privilege going into a place that was colonized by the U.S. So Filipinos, people of color, when they discern whether or not they should go on the trip, first of all, they actually discern whether or not they should go on the trip, whether they should go into that space, right? But we are there to kind of help accompany them in that process of discernment. And as Reverend Izzy said, it is about going to where folks are and building those relationships, and not doing it from a place of guilt, but being clear on what your intentions are, and actually being able to come with those intentions in an authentic way, to reach out in an authentic way, not to be weighed down by guilt, because oftentimes when we bring folks to the Philippines and they come back, some feel just guilty and defeated and hopeless and not knowing how to engage. But really, the question doesn't come back to just you and how you feel. It should surpass that and say, okay, how does this affect how I move and navigate being in a collective space? Because ultimately, it's about the community. It's not about just the individual. That's not to, put down any personal feelings or not to affirm any struggles that you have to go through as an individual, but it's to just put out there that there's more to it, that there's more light to be reaching towards. So I think people will know if you're there because you really care, or if you're there because you do want to make a checklist and make sure you got everyone in attendance. So relationship is very, very important, and working on yourself is very important.
Final question? Yeah.
It's probably not directly under Project Homeless Connect, but is there currently some sort of project underway in the city of San Francisco to address affordable LGBTQ senior housing?
There's an agency called Open House, that specifically works with LGBT seniors to find housing. One of the things that the city is working on is an LGBTQ friendly shelter. We have a lot of shelter in San Francisco. Not necessarily enough, but I would advocate instead of building more shelter, we should be building more housing and move in that general direction. But one of the things we hear time and time again is that LGBT people don't feel safe and comfortable in the general shelter system. Even in San Francisco, where we have policies around you can go to the shelter of the gender identity, that you identify with. We have some of those policies in place, which I think are a good step, but we aren't able to do much around making people feel safe and welcome. So the city has taken a big step towards getting a queer shelter up and running. It's going to be in the mission. And it's something that I think is really needed. And, I'm not an advocate for more shelter. I'm an advocate for housing, really focusing on solutions. But this is one I'm getting behind because my folks are coming in and they won't go to the shelter. So what they're doing is camping, or they're trading sex for a place to stay at night, or they're doing other things that really put them in a lot of risk because they're avoiding going to the shelter. So if you think that selling your body is safer than going to a shelter, we have a really big problem. I mean, that's just not right. And I've heard it not just once or twice. And so it's something that the city is working on that I'm really in support of.
And it's at a Lutheran church. It's going to be at Saints Mary and Martha Lutheran, a Spanish-speaking congregation. Prior to that, another Lutheran church, St. Paulus, in the 80s and 90s had a transgender shelter. Okay, you can have one more question. She answered quickly.
I was curious for people of faith or who are religious leaders, if you could reflect a little bit about your faith beliefs that have led you to this work, or that inform you or keep you hopeful or light a fire under you.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
I am not a religious person. I'm a secular Jew who spent a lot of time in Catholic school. And with Christian parents, with a Christian mom and a pastor brother and a Jewish father. And my faith is a smorgasbord of a lot of things. But it is the moral lessons I grew up with from both my Jewish side and my Catholic side. And I think, there's something about, as a non-religious person, there's something about those lessons of morality and treating people as you want to be treated that just sort of stay with you forever. You can't shake them, even when you're trying to shake some of the other stuff. And I have to say, it is also the common thing that brings my crazily diverse religious family together, is this idea of economic justice. And it's something that we can fight, and we do, on a lot of different things. And it's something that can bring us together and we can find commonality around, which I find really inspiring to kind of keep moving forward. It's nice to be able to have that touch point. So that's sort of the opposite probably of your question, but I think it's still relevant in a lot of different ways. And I think it also, when talking about poverty and talking about homelessness, engaging the faith community is really important. And faith communities in San Francisco and in other communities I've worked in have a lot of power. They have space that often a lot of other organizations don't have. And so being able to bring them into the fold is easy and really important. People want to do right. I think this city, you can walk around and homelessness is pervasive. It's in your face. It's in a way that in a bunch of other cities I've lived in, I've never experienced. And I hear time and again from religious leaders as well as from lay folks who are like, we all need to be doing something, we need to be doing more, and people feel like they don't have a solution. And so I think finding that hope together around treating people with dignity and respect is sort of your baseline, right? You can treat someone with humanity, someone who maybe smells terrible and hasn't showered in weeks and is spitting on you when they talk and being, all these like confounding things happening at once. They might be having a mental health crisis. All of these things, if you can see that person as your brother or your sister and build that human connection, that is essential to engaging them in treatment. That's essential to getting them into housing. Which is ultimately how we'll end this crisis. And so if you can't do that, you can't start the process. And for me, that's really motivating.
Okay. I guess for myself, one of the theological concepts, or whatever you want to call it, that I keep with me is that I've learned through this work is Imago Dei, that we all bear the image of God. And the reason why that really resonates for me and why that that's a model that I carry throughout this work, is because I had to do a lot of learning about myself in order to proclaim Imago Dei within myself. Because to be in solidarity, you have to have some positive sense of self, you know? You can't, to be in solidarity, for example, is not to become those you want to be in solidarity with, but to affirm who you are, and in that diversity, in that difference, come together. That's the beauty of solidarity. And I also feel like that's the beauty of Imago Dei. And a lot of these folks who may perpetuate these systems that hurt other people, I don't feel like they're practicing Imago Dei. For example, some of the politicians in the Philippines who may be perpetuating oppression there, economic oppression, all the kinds of oppression, but economically, they probably don't identify poor people as people who also bear the image of God, right? They see themselves as maybe they're the true Filipinos and these are just poor people who can't get their stuff together, right? Imago Dei counters that very idea that others have different worth, that others have different value. Imago Dei actually affirms that we are all of worth, we are all valued just because we are created by God. So there's that keeps me going, and the other thing that keeps me going is just remembering that Christ showed up. And sometimes all you have to do is show up. You know, sometimes it might be inconvenient, but dude, look at the inconvenience that he went through. I mean, to be in solidarity is to go through that kind of sacrifice, to go through struggle in order to be there with others, because at that point you can then kind of let go of yourself and your own ego and become a body that, the body of Christ, right? That really has the image of God on our faces, you know? That's one of the ways that we can actually see Christ here and now.
I'll be quick. I always get the question, why are you still in this church? Because I decided to be a minister when I was in 5th grade. You know, children's camps, like the Jesus camps, where they ask you, who wants to be a pastor or a deaconess or a Bible woman, you know, and I've seen how pastors work. They come and visit my parents, and there's always Bible study, and there's lots of food, and pastors get gifts and all nice things. And on Sundays, the pastor preaches and speaks, and everybody listens, and I just loved it. And not just because of that, but I think God said, you know what, you really want to do this. And so I did step up and said, I want to be a minister. And since then, I was being doted upon by everybody, you know, church staff, like, oh, this is our little Pastor Izzy growing up. But one thing that was also true that people didn't really know was that it was also in 5th grade that I started having crushes on my male classmates. And I knew there was something different about that. And so I kept asking myself, like, God, you called me to serve in a church that will not accept me for these things. Is this just a phase? Maybe I'll grow it. I started dating deaconesses and looking for, you know, women pastors in seminary. And what really makes me stay is the fact that when I was baptized, I just gave you the background of my call. But when I was baptized, actually I was baptized twice. I was baptized Catholic because my mom's family is Catholic. And my dad, being a Protestant, a new convert to Methodism, said, I'm not getting married in the Catholic Church. And the deal was, okay, well, you get married in the Catholic Church, the firstborn will be baptized Catholic. So they got married in the Methodist Church, and I was baptized Catholic. But my dad, sneaky, 2 weeks later, took me to a Methodist church outside Manila, Thomas United Methodist Church, which is the home church of your ancestors, of your family. I know one of your uncle ran our children's choir when I was pastor there. But so I was baptized in that church, and my dad just informed my mom, and so I didn't even know who my godparents are. I think the pastor there who officiated their wedding just gathered people, okay, you're the witnesses, and I was baptized there. But this is why I stay in this church, because God brought me full circle. My first church assignment as an ordained minister was that church. I came up to the pulpit that first Sunday. It was communion, first Sunday of June, I think, of when the conference year started. And I brought the baptismal book, dusty baptismal book, up the pulpit, and I said, I was baptized in this church. And I said, I feel that God has called me full circle. Without outing myself, then I said, you promised in this church. You confirmed me in this church that I was marked by God. I want this church, the whole denomination, to fulfill that promise. I am so gracious to this church that I'm waiting for it to fulfill its promise. And I'm not done yet. So until that time when the church says, whatever baptismal, covenant we had with you when you were born, we want to fulfill it. When we say that we're taking away all kinds of discrimination in our book of law and accepting all queer people as people of God. And I said, at the communion table, it's an open table. In baptism, you don't ask if you're gay or is this daughter going to be gay when she grows up? No. So I'm staying in this church because the sacraments has promised me something. And the church has not fulfilled its promise yet. I'm waiting for that day to be fulfilled. That's why I'm staying. I want to see that day. I was at that Lutheran service when I cried at St. Mark's, when you had all the clergy that were, sent out, who were not accepted, were suddenly welcomed back. I cried. And I said, in due time. I was there in full regalia. I was celebrating with you, and I'm sure that when my church changes,
I'll come to yours. I'll wear my outfit.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone who's on our panel.
Oh, for me.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Nothing.
Well, I guess for me, I would borrow the words from John Wesley. The world is my parish. My mom is Methodist deaconess, so some of my childhood was mostly playing in the church, but like my community outside the church, like in school and in some other organizations, that is the one that taught me about social justice. And then those communities and those organizations, somehow I think when I was in college led me back to the faith perspective. And like what Pastor Reverend Easy told us today, that our work as social transformers and justice people is not yet done, because we have to transform the church still. And that is pretty much, that's one of the things that we are really working on in the Philippines. And like, I really believe that the church is a very prophetic place, a very powerful institution that can actually accompany people who are really oppressed to rise up and to really transform the world together. So yeah, one of the things that I'm really, I think I'm really happy about is I've stayed here in the church and to be with, people, be with you, and so that we can go together and transform the structures that are and injustices that are happening. So that's it.
Now, yay, Pam.
Yeah.